So you need a routine where you are the designer and you are the creator and you're bringing order and structure back into your life. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to walk you through the life design process, and it's really easy. It's just 3 steps: defining your objectives, what are the premises, and continual renewal. And these are the steps of change, and in project management I've kind of condensed this down. But I'm going to walk you through and we're going to design your ideal life together. So get out a pen, paper, get out a notebook, we're going to design it together. So before I get into designing your ideal life, there's one principle that I want to talk about, and that principle is entropy. And entropy is just the natural tendency for things to go toward chaos and toward disorder. So let's just take an example of how your morning could go. So from a probability perspective, you could wake up late, you could not make your bed, you could not journal, you could miss your alarm, you could stop by a fast food place and eat that for breakfast. So there's a bunch of options that could happen. Now, there's only one way that your ideal morning could go. You have one ideal. So when you think about it from an odds perspective, the odds are really not in your favor that the morning's going to go how you want it to go. There's a huge probability that if there's not some intervention by you and making conscious choices, that if we were just going to roll the dice and leave the morning to fate, the huge probability is that it's going to go toward disorder. So there's one way that you want it to go. Everything else is not how you want it to go. So there's hundreds of ways for how it could go how you don't want it to go. So the likelihood is for things to go toward disorder. These are all these options. Your morning could go like this, 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 this. There's only one path for your ideal morning. This, then this step, then this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. So what we have to do is, in creating an ideal life, we have to create an ordering routine, and it takes intentionality. Because of the law of entropy, you're not going to just stumble into an ideal life. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to do this ordering process. So get out a piece of paper. We're going to combat entropy together. Okay, so step 1, we need to define objectives. You're not going to stumble into your ideal life, or you're not going to get your ideal life, your most happy life, if you don't even know what it is. So what we have to do is we have to define those objectives. And for a lot of people, their ideal life consists of a few different things. The number one thing that I find makes people very happy and is part of their ideal life that's likely to maybe not be part of their current life is to always be working on a creative project. And this doesn't have to be creative in the stereotypical sense of the word, like art or painting. Like, I think this thing that I'm doing right now, this is kind of a creative thing that I'm doing. And when I think back to when I made lasting change in my life, when I first started making steps toward making change in my life, having this creative project 3 years ago when I was still teaching at the time, and I would go into the coffee shop before work teaching, and I would go and I'd work on this creative project. And that's how I felt so fulfilled. So if you think about your ideal day, maybe if I use myself for an example, working on that creative project, maybe that's working on YouTube 1 hour per day. The second thing that I think people have a lot when they think of their ideal life are ideal routines, and this makes up a big chunk of the day. So when you think about outlining your ideal routines, there could be several in this category. For me, it's I want to read half an hour a day. Maybe I want to jog 30 minutes a day. Maybe I want to journal half an hour per day. And you can go so on down the line, and this is where you focus a lot of your effort. And then finally, the last category are your ideal habits. So the difference between a routine and a habit is a routine typically has more tasks than a habit. A habit is typically a fewer amount of tasks. And also the difference between a routine and a habit is the routine is more intentional. It's causing focused effort. A habit is something you already are habitually doing. So what are you already doing? What's already a habit that's part of your ideal life? So for me, having a protein shake in the morning, that's already part of my ideal life. So for a lot of people, when they do goal setting, this is where they stop. They're okay, I defined my objectives, perfect, now I'm going to get started on this thing. But you need to make sure that you really think about a few more things. That's only step 1. We're not even on to step 2, to step 3. This is only step 1. And it makes the biggest difference between actually achieving the goal, actually reaching the ideal life, and not. So when you think about project management, when you're defining your objectives, also what you need to do is you need to define the alternatives. Because if you don't clearly define the alternative, then a few weeks down the line, when you're not excited about your goals anymore, this is where people start to fall off the road. So the alternative, if you look at, so if I start living toward my ideal life, or I don't start living toward my ideal life, these are the paths. And it's up to you to pick. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. And so you're just, if we look at, maybe 1 year from now, maybe those paths aren't that different. My life hasn't changed that much if I do it or do not do it a year from now. Now, if we look 5 years from now, those paths are really starting to diverge. When you start thinking about, if I never took action on these things, the consequences are starting to get bigger and bigger. When I think about the emotions that I would have if I don't do it, that's starting to get more and more depressing. It's starting to get more and more burdened. If I think about 10 years out, Okay, I'm a very different person if I don't take action on this or if I do take action on this. So it's important to look at what are the alternative roads, and is this really the ideal? And if it's not really the ideal, don't do it. But if it is the ideal, don't sell yourself short by taking this path that, on the short term, it's a lot of hard work, and a lot of the best decisions are more difficult on the short term, but more rewarding on the long term. Whereas a lot of the easiest things, they're easy on the short term. You don't have to change, you don't have to put in the work, you don't have to build the muscle. But on the long term, that's really soul sucking. So you really have to look at the alternative. Don't just assess, okay, how does this turn out? You also need to assess how the alternative would turn out. So something that I tend to see at the start of the new year is I'll start to see these challenges that'll pop up, which are really enticing. So I'll see these challenges like, okay, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to live as my ideal self. And that's a great sentiment because you're thinking to yourself, yeah, okay, if I want to be my ideal self, if I never start living like my ideal self, that gap is never going to be bridged, so I need to do that. And so when I look at challenges like this, everyone is so jazzed up at the beginning. They're like, yes, okay, we're living as our ideal selves, we're making change, we're doing the thing. And I look down 6 weeks down the line and they're all burnt out and it hasn't lasted. And the question is, why hasn't it lasted? And the question is, they didn't look at the premises. Okay, I have all these goals that I want to do. Okay, now let's put them on a schedule here. Okay, so in the case of me, a few years ago before I was doing YouTube full time, so if I looked at my ideal schedule, okay, so I was working from 7 a.m. to 3. Okay, that's a constraint. That's a time constraint. Okay, I accidentally put this on Sunday, but let's just pretend here. I'd work from 7 to 3 every day. That's a constraint. Okay, so when you look at all these goals, you say, okay, I want to read half an hour a day. I want to jog half an hour a day. I want to journal half an hour a day. All of a sudden, it's like, wait. Where is this all fitting in this creative project? Where is all this fitting in? A lot of people don't want to, at the goal setting phase, put it on a schedule because it doesn't seem fun to put it on a schedule. All of a sudden, you got to look at these constraints. This is So what I found, I tried a lot of different things, and it's important to experiment when you get into this phase. So when I was wanting to do YouTube and I was still teaching, I determined after experimenting, I tried working on YouTube in the morning. I tried working on it right after work. I tried working on it late in the evening. And I experimented with all sorts of different ways for myself. And I determined that for myself, I do my most productive creative work in the morning. Now that posed a really big challenge for me because teaching starts really early. It's nice that you have your evenings, but it starts, I have to be there at 7. So it was really starting early. So if I wanted to actually work on the creative project in the morning, I wanted to give it my full effort. I didn't want to give teaching my first full effort. I wanted to give YouTube my first full effort because that was my priority. So for me, I determined that from 6 to 7, I was going to be in a coffee shop working on YouTube. I knew that it was a short-term sacrifice that I was making for a long-term reward, which has really panned out because now I'm able to quit teaching and do this full time. That was a sacrifice, but I knew that in my ideal life I wanted to work on a creative project. So you fill in this creative project here. So then if I want to jog every day, then I found that I actually like to do that in the evening. That's okay. So I like to jog. Maybe I do my jogging in the evening. So at first you have a project, and it's maybe your number one priority. And it's taking a lot of focused effort and a lot of skill. So when I think about for myself, filming a YouTube video, planning a YouTube video, at first that whole routine, that was taking a lot of focused effort. How does this work? How do I do this thing? So then over time, that project that took a lot of focused energy, that can become kind of on autopilot, and it helps you reach other things. So now doing YouTube videos isn't something that takes all this effort for me, but it's helped me get other things that I want. So now what took focused effort was making this planner. So for this, last couple months, I've been pouring all my time and all of my energy into this planner, and YouTube became kind of a resource. So the things, a lot of times you'd be like, I don't know if I want to do this thing, it's going to be difficult, but actually it will become a resource over time. What seems like a liability right now, or it's taking a lot of energy, these things just keep stacking on top of each other. Over time, you start stacking these things, and there will be more and more and more things that become just on autopilot, or they become a habit. So this is what we've done. On the first slide, we looked at our objectives. What is our ideal life? Then, on the second slide, we looked at our constraints. We looked at the premises, and it's kind of So this right here is our real life. In our life, we have to deal with the constraints, and we're meeting some of the objectives already. So what we want to do is we want to continually bring these circles more and more and more and more into alignment. We don't want to just have objectives, but they're detached from reality and the constraints. And we don't want to just focus on the constraints and we can't do it, okay, we can't do it for this reason, this reason, this reason. We need the optimism and some of the reality, some of that pessimism to get into reality. So we want to have more and more of this come into alignment, more of the objectives coming into the real world of constraints. So what we need is what I would call a negentropy routine. So negentropy is the opposite of entropy. It's got this negative here, negative entropy. So it's the opposite of entropy. So the opposite, if entropy is bringing in all this disorder and all this chaos, negentropy is bringing in order and structure into this thing. Those things need to go on the mind. They need to go from in the mind to being on paper. And that's how we start streamlining this. And so instead of thinking about all of these different things, it has never helped me to think about so many goals at once. I know a lot of times people will want to set so many goals, but it's never helped me to set so many at once. I always focus on the one priority. What's the one thing that I want to invest in so that it can become a resource to help me later on? And so the one thing, like when I think about when everything changed in my life, it's when I started weekly planning, monthly planning. Basically, all I do is show up to my planner every day. So if I was going to encourage anyone to adopt one habit, instead of adopting all of these different habits, I would just adopt one habit for the year, and that's planning. You know, planning, it's where you bring intentionality. It's where you bring order back into your life, because there's only one way you get to your ideal life, and there's thousands of ways you get to your not ideal life. So just from a probability perspective, if you want to be hands-off and not be involved as being the creator and the designer of your life is going to just merge into all of this chaos. So you need a routine where you are the designer and you are the creator, and you're bringing order and structure back into your life. So in this planner, it has a yearly spread where you do your yearly planning, you do your yearly creative project, chunking it down to quarterly projects and monthly projects and weekly outcomes. And then it has, a monthly spread where you take care of your routines and your habits. And then it has a weekly daily spread where you're processing, how have I been intentional this week? What did I do this week that will still matter 5 years from now? And when you have a routine like this, then you can consciously reorient yourself to the bigger picture. So I've talked about a lot of principles in this video without necessarily getting into the nitty-gritty practical. So I'm doing a series all throughout this month about how to make this actually practical. So I'm going to get into the practicals about how you actually weekly plan, how you actually monthly plan, and showing up to your planner, and how you order your life and choose your life intentionally so that it doesn't just happen to you. So if you're interested in more videos about planning, please subscribe. I'll be doing a bunch more of these. And also, if you're interested in my planner that I made, I spent like 2 months working on this. I'm so proud of this. There are so many questions that I like to ask myself, like during weekly planning. There's so many things that are important to me that when I think about wanting to live an intentional life that I want to do. And so it was just too much to make a streamlined routine. So I just added the questions on the side to make sure that these things are happening. So if you're interested in this planner, I will have it linked in the description, alexiskingsley.com. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.